Welcome back to Hoffman Tactical. So today I'm going to be doing a quick review of the WuLoo driveway alarm. So this is like a Chinese brand. I've reviewed the guard line before and wasn't all that impressed in it. And this is comparable with its features. It's a 3-sensor system. So there's the receiver, and then it has 3 sensors. You can see one of them back here, and they're motion detectors, so passive infrared motion detectors. And basically, so I'll go over the way the system works, and then we'll talk about how it works as far as performance goes. And I've only been trying it for a couple days now, so we'll have to do another video on it. We'll do a more in-depth video, but today we'll just talk about the basics of how it works and what I think of it. So basically, each sensor has a rechargeable lithium battery in it. It does have a solar panel on the top. When you get the sensor, it has a charging cable which uses to power this receiver unit. Also works to charge your sensors. So you charge all the sensors. It takes about 2 hours a piece. There's the light on front turns red when you plug it in, turns green when it's charged, so you know when it's full. Then you can install your sensors. It includes the screws. It actually includes a little screwdriver to install it on your wood object. I find that difficult to use. You're going to want to find something a little bit better. Anyway, so the sensors, once they're charged, they claim they run up to 24 months, or it's like 2 years maximum. I'm guessing that's quite a bit inflated, but I'm guessing you can get some pretty good performance, probably at least a year out of it with the amount of power they use. Okay, so it operates on a very similar way to the guard line did, as far as the receiver has different tones, it's got different lights, it can hold up to 8 sensors. As I said, I got a 3-sensor system, but you can have up to 8, so you can buy additional sensors, and the way you pair them is there are 3 switches in the back, so you have 8 different possibilities, which is basically the code of that sensor. So it comes pre-programmed to the 3-sensor system, but you can flip those switches from 1 to 8. And that corresponds to 1 to 8 on your receiver unit, so you know which sensor is going off. And once you do that, you just turn the sensor and the receiver unit on, and they're already linked. It's all that's really involved there. Okay, and then you can also go into the menus, which are pretty easy to use on here, and you can change what tone happens with each sensor. So I can give you some examples of the tones here. Okay, so these are some examples of the tones, and it's some sort of melody chip in there recording them. They are all very similar, so you got to pick through it to find ones that sound different and unique. So it's not like the guard line had quite a few interesting, unique options. This one really doesn't so much, which is unfortunate, and it isn't that loud. It's loud enough it'll get your attention, but you're going to have to keep it next to where you're sleeping if you want it to wake you up. If it's in the next room, it's going to be too quiet. Okay, and also it doesn't have any external relays on it. It's very basic, so you can't hook it up to, let's say, your camera system to automatically freeze your cameras. But as far as the driveway alarm features go, it's fully featured. It tells you which alarm is going off, and it can sound a unique alarm for whichever sensor went off. Okay, so it's powered by 3 AA batteries in the back, or you can use the included power adapter to run it off the wall, whichever works. I believe you can do both at the same time, and then the batteries act as a backup. So now let's talk about the performance of the sensors, how many false alarms I've gotten, and how sensitive they are. Okay, so the first place I tested the sensor was on our test driveway right here, and it was pointing out across the driveway, pretty close to perpendicular to the driveway, and you can see the main highway here is right over to your left. And that, within the field of view of the sensor, is beyond 40 feet. It's closer to 50 feet, and probably 80% of the time, cars going by would trigger the sensor on maximum sensitivity, which is what the default is and which is what I've been testing them on. Now, when the sun was shining on the trees, like you can see a little higher here, I'll show you right up here, when the sun was shining on the trees and then the wind blew and moved the leaves around, it triggered the sensor as well, those warm leaves moving around on maximum sensitivity, which was unfortunate, and hence I moved the sensor to a new location, and I'm doing some testing there. But to give you an idea of the sensitivity, the sensor easily picked up cars at 40 feet driving past, actually, at a oblique angle to the sensor. As far as picking up objects walking through the valley here, through the driveway, up the driveway, it picked them up just fine with complete consistency. We didn't have a single case where it didn't go off, but we did have some false alarms from. In most cases, I could see it was from moving trees and leaves. Here is our sensor, and we're looking across an open field here at our second test sensor location. And as you can see, there are no trees in the view. The nearest tree is down here, probably about 60 feet away, and we have a barbed wire fence running along here at about 40 feet. Right here, directly ahead of the sensor. So walking across there, I've gotten 100% detections by the sensor, and we've actually had 0 false alarms here, despite wind moving the grass around, sun, clouds, different conditions. We haven't had any rain yet to test it with, but we've had 0 false alarms in the open on maximum sensitivity, and we have had 100% detection of people walking through here or vehicles driving through here. So in the open right now, we're performing really well. Okay, now let's talk about minimum sensitivity. So I've got the sensor down here on the test post looking across the drive on minimum sensitivity, and this is about 20 feet up here to the fence, and it gives 100% detection while I'm walking across the fence up there. I haven't had any cases of it not going off. And as of now, I haven't had any false alarms either, but I haven't had it up long enough to really tell, because there is trees over here that will blow around. But we are on minimum sensitivity. There's 4 sensitivity modes, if I haven't mentioned that before. There's max, and then there's 2 intermediate ones, and there's min. So I've gone on a minimum sensitivity here, and we're still easily detecting walking past at 20 feet. On maximum sensitivity, for reference, it'll easily detect you at 40 feet. Even though it actually is rated at 33 feet, I find it detects just fine at 40 feet. So at minimum sensitivity, we're definitely doing just fine with practical detection, but we've still got to figure out false alarms. Okay, let me talk just a little bit about the physical construction of the sensor. Obviously, it's a PIR sensor, so we've got our lens in here, and it all appears waterproof. I believe it's supposed to be waterproof being outdoors. We've got a little solar cell on top, and then it has a ball joint that allows you to maneuver it pointing in the correct direction. I do find the ball joint doesn't have enough movement really, so you have to get it in pretty close to the right spot with those little screws, because you can be somewhat limited in your diagonal movement with that ball joint. Okay, now the base plate has 4 mounting screws on it, and concludes with actually quite nice screws. It has that little screwdriver which I mentioned, but you're probably going to get something a little bigger than that, or an electric driver to install it, since it gets pretty old using that to screw it into any kind of hard wood. You can see here I've mounted diagonally onto the tree, and any other round object or even a square object, this is the easiest way to mount it really, because obviously with 4 holes you can't get all 4 of them on the tree at one time. And it does have an interesting finish on it. It's like painted, printed somehow onto the curved plastic with a camouflage pattern, which is interesting and does help it blend in, which is good, because that will lead me to my next subject. Okay, so the next thing I want to quickly mention is that it does have a power switch built into the sensor, which can be a downside, because it actually could be turned off if someone spots the sensor. It can be walked around, or it can actually be turned off, and a vehicle can be driven by it. Of course, you can always shoot the sensor with a suppressed weapon, which, as far as I can tell, there would be no warning of the sensor being destroyed, or if it was smashed with a bat or something from the side. With any of these simpler driveway alarm sensors, like the guard line or the WuLoo sensor, hitting it or destroying the sensor in some way without destroying the radio equipment internally, without setting off the passive infrared sensor, will defeat the system. But this can also actually be turned off without damaging it at all. There's a power button on the bottom, and I'll illustrate that here. I got the receiver. The sensor is on and working. And I'm now going to turn the sensor off without setting it off. So you can listen, and it shouldn't go off. So once again, the sensor is on. Now, we're going to turn it off, and there's a little, right underneath, we have our button right next to the charging port. We'll pop our rubber off. And 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 seconds should be enough to turn it off, and the light will flash once. Now, sensor's off, I can walk by it, and at your home base with your receiver, you're not going to know any better, know any difference whether it was turned off or on. So that's another little complaint I have. I wish it just didn't have that. Or if it did, when it does turn off, it would alert the sensor, because it is a little weakness. Of course, it is camouflaged. It blends in actually quite well, and if you carefully place it, that won't be a problem. and most people aren't going to be looking for sensors, but some, definitely the higher threats, more dangerous people will be looking for sensors, and that's something you're going to need to consider is camouflaging them. The receiver unit, I think it's got a nice interface, but I think it really should have had a external relay where it could have, where you can have it connect to like an external bell or your video system. Also, if it had the tones on it were a little different, or it had a voice or something, so a little more discrimination or more unique tones in it, that would be nice as well as a little bit louder speaker. And that's really about it right now as far as the cons go, because it's still too early to tell whether we're going to have a lot of false alarms or not. Okay, guys, be sure to stay tuned for the next video. I'll put it up here when I get it. The more in-depth review of this sensor, where after I have it up for a couple weeks and I have it in different places and different environments like the rain, for an example, I'll be able to know and tell you guys whether it has a lot of false alarms or if that's strictly in certain environments which can be worked around by the user. So we'll see that, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching.